That's Andy. Hi, Andy. Are you waving or have you got a question, Andy? We started, but you can ask a question if you got one. Or was that a wave? As he struggles to find the unmute button.
You know, there's a rule on Teams. You don't make fun. You don't make fun of people who are struggling with the mute button.
It's got to be the done thing now these days, surely. I think everybody's had enough time to figure out that mute button by now, surely, haven't they?
Yeah, you think so, right? Windows 11 is making it easier, right? Because there's a big, huge mute button in Windows 11 itself.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Have they? You know, I've not upgraded. I've done it on a VM, but I've not actually seen it myself yet. Is there?
Yeah, next to the clock. Awesome.
Well, that'll make it a little bit easier then, I would have thought.
I just use Control-Shift-M. I don't even bother with the button.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Okay, let's make a start. Off we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Patenka and I'm a cloud solution architect from Oxford. Hey everybody, my name is John Lunn, aka Johnny Chips, and I'm a technical architect and I work for BT Enterprise in the UK.
My name is Ahmed Lajan and I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Anna McNally. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft.
Hi, my name is George Bloch. I work for the Intellectual Property Office as a senior engineer for the end user services.
I'm Richard Griffiths, and I'm the Cloud Solutions Architect for Compute.com.
Hi, I'm Adam Kaya, and I work as a technical payment specialist. This is the thing for me.
Okie dokie, and here we are again, another monthly event. So yeah, hello and welcome everybody, and ho ho ho. Hope you like my new hat. Yeah, obviously it's the December event. We always try and do something a little bit more festive, I guess, and heartwarming or inspiring or something like that. We had a great event if you were with us back last year. We're hoping to kind of repeat that this year with two fantastic speakers. But as we always start off these events, just to let you know who's behind the scenes sorting these things out for you. As always, there's our the organisers of this user group. As we say every month, it's a community user group. So we aim to try and do whatever it is the audience wants from us, to try and get the relevant speakers on that fit the needs to what you're looking for, what you're looking to learn or understand in a little bit more of a capacity. So feel free to reach out and say hello, ask us any questions that you need to. Our LinkedIn details are on the screen there, as well as some of our Twitter handles. So come and say hello. Okay, so this month, December, we've got two fantastic speakers. We've got Olivier there waiting in the wings, as you can see. He's going to come on and give us, that what I'm hoping for is that inspiration. Personally, I've been inspired over the last 18 months around the world, wonderful world of IoT, and I'm sure Olivier is going to blow us away with some of the basically how Microsoft has simplified IoT now moving forward and into the future. So really looking forward to that session. It's going to be an interactive session, so get your questions ready, fire them into the chats, and I'm sure Olivier will call you off mute if needs be at relevant points. And then following on from Olivier, we've got the amazing Mike Pfieffer joining us. So I think he'll be joining in about an hour or so, just before his session, obviously with the time difference and things like that. So that's going to be another fantastic session. It's really about taking control of your own career. I've spent a bit of time having a chat with Mike over the last few months and some of the sessions he's been delivering. So really hoping that's going to give you all some fantastic kind of food for thought moving into the new year as well. So couple up a fantastic talk on IoT. And thinking about where you're going with your career, I'm sure you'll put two and two together and realise that you should all be working in IoT at some stage. So anyway, that's what we got lined up for you tonight. From a timings point of view, the usual hello, welcome and housekeeping that I'm doing at the moment. Olivier will be starting in about 5 or 10 minutes time, so only a couple of slides to get through. And then Mike should be joining us around about 7:30. We've got the usual quiz. However, there is a change. If you are there we go. Matt's thrown his arms up in the air because he is our quiz master. If you're used to using Kahoot, we have a change this month. So I'll go through the housekeeping rules. There's the change there. It's Menti. So if you're used to using Kahoot, we're using it's the Mentimeter app that you can download on your mobile devices, or you can just browse to menti.com. Very similar format. You'll get a code after the 2 sessions are finished, and you can join and have some fun and win some prizes as well. So usual housekeeping rules, please do be courteous to each other. Remember, there is no such thing as a silly question or a stupid question. Feel free to ask anything that you like. And what you'll find, you ask the silly and simple questions that you think they are, and you'll invariably be helping a lot of other people out, as is always the case. So please do get involved. Like I say, it's an interactive session. You do have control of your mute buttons. You've got your video cameras. If you're wearing Christmas jumpers and hats, please do come off and put your camera on, take some pictures and tweet them out to us. We like to try and spread the word as well, have a bit of fun. Like I say, please feel free to ask any questions. Use the chat function. If the presenter asks you to come off mute, feel free. But please do stay in control of your mute button if you can, just so there's no disturbance. That would be awesome. And at the end of every event, we'll put up a QR code. We do like feedback. If you can, give us that minute or two just to give a little bit of feedback, what you felt was good, bad, what you'd like to see at the user group. It does help us kind of pick the right sessions to suit the audience, the fantastic audience that you are. So please do leave us some of that feedback. That would be awesome. And lastly, just enjoy, sit back and enjoy the sessions, because they are going to be absolutely wonderful. Quick word of thanks to our sponsors. The same as the Northern Azure User Group, the Glasgow User Group, we're sponsored by the fantastic Servant, based up in Scotland there. They've been a huge support of the user group pretty much since its inception, pushing 18 months ago now, I think, since we went virtual with this. They've been huge support for us. It's not only been Servant. Normally we'd have Des or one of the guys from Servant on saying hello and just giving us a quick overview. I don't think we've got anybody on tonight from Servant. So we'll move on to our other sponsor, Admiral, locally HQ'd insurance. They do far more than insurance, don't they, Admiral, now? So fantastic support that we've had again from Admiral over the last 18 months or so. So big shout out to those guys, and of course NetApp. So there are 3 kind of headline sponsors that help support the user group. And whether you realize it or not, they do offer a lot of financial support to put in prizes. To when we've already done one face-to-face event, so hopefully we'll get back to that come March next year. They put their hand in the pocket for beer and pizza, as we would normally see at those kind of events. So there we go. That's a big thanks to all our sponsors. Truly are really appreciated. But look, let's not waste any more time. I think we should just move straight into tonight's events. On which note, I'll hand directly over to Olivier and say hello, Olivier.
Hey, John, thanks. Hello, everyone. I don't know where you found that picture of me, but that's horrendous. I'm just like, I was scared just watching it. It's like, what? That's what happens when you have things on the internet. You don't have control over any of it. That's what's going on.
And get rid of that screen now, Olivier. Is that what you're saying?
That's fine. That's okay. No worries. I'll take over. So I'm spotlighted anyway. So I guess I'm big on the screens of people. Hopefully, cool. So thanks for having me. It's really nice. Just word of introduction about who I am and what I'm doing over here at Microsoft. So you can follow me on Twitter. Down there here. I'm also the host of a video show called the IoT Show. In case you're not subscribed, just go there, hit the button and notification, like all YouTubers say. And, if you want to read blogs, we do have also a blog that we maintain and also invite our community members to come and post on. So if you're interested in posting some interesting IoT projects, just go on and reach out directly to me, and I'll be more than happy to tell you how you can contribute blog posts up there. So I'm part of a team within Microsoft that is looking after the IoT developers, and we're trying to make sure that the IoT developers' voice is heard and that developers out there are aware of what's going on within Microsoft when it comes to IoT. And IoT as in Internet of Things. I just make the assumption that everyone knows about all the acronyms and so on. But here, my talk is something that I hope will be interactive with you guys and that we can have a conversation. And it's all about simplifying IoT. It's something that at Microsoft we've been pretty big on since the inception of the team, which was like 6.5 years ago, the Azure IoT team. We've been doing IoT for a long time. I've been doing IoT for 20-something years. It was called embedded development. Some of you might be familiar with that. Then we started calling that smart devices, and then smart connected devices, and then came in the cloud, and we're calling that Internet of Things. But at the end of the day, it's still the same old thing. Tiny device sensors connect to an application. You do something out of the data, display it. Now you can do rich analytics on top of it and extract insights and then take action. So you basically are now able to integrate your physical environment into your digital world. And that's very much what IoT is about. It can get complicated. It's one way I like to describe IoT, because we all have our own definition, but one way I like to describe IoT is to say that it's a bundle of technologies at the end of the day. It's something that gathers technologies around embedded development, around connectivity, around security, cloud, now analytics through AI and other machine learning services. And at the end of the day, what makes it complex is a couple of things. The fact that it's a mix of technologies. So you have to have different people with different backgrounds interacting and working together. And that's one of the main reasons why IoT ends up being complicated. It's really because of the fact that I think everyone is just shutting down cameras. I suppose that's because they don't see me full screen. I don't know. We'll see. Just interrupt me, point to questions, tell me if I'm not showing the right screen, if I'm showing any screen. Don't hesitate a second. So at the end of the day, I was saying that IoT can become complex because you have these many different types of people: embedded developer, hardware engineer, software engineer, working on the firmware, working on software on that device, have to be an expert in real-time systems, or sometimes don't have a clue about what a device is about. They're building an application that will manage these devices, have to deal with security, have to deal with integration into business application, have to deal with machine learning and AI that tends to relate to different types of businesses and realms, physics and mechanical and chemistry and all of that can come into play. Data scientists need to be involved as well. Web designers for the interfaces of these applications. So that really is becoming complex. But like in all domain, especially in software, you can now leverage platforms, libraries, solutions from third party and aggregate them. And that's what we're trying to do at Microsoft. We're trying to deliver services as a platform that allows our customers to aggregate, to grab a box of Lego and build from there. And there are different areas that I want to highlight today, but I really want to react to a question that you might have about IoT and how complex it is, and any questions about it. So don't hesitate to just go off topic or off the rails here. I'll be more than happy to change the talk, change the conversation. I have a deck down there. You don't want to see slides though. So what I'm going to do is bring up some demos and have a conversation where we're walking through. And the demos I want to bring up are related to few areas that might come up as complex when you start touching to IoT, and showing how it can be made simpler. First, by the way we're talking about it, and then by the way we're approaching it, and by the available services and solutions and tools that are out there that will allow you to get started and prototyping and then in business rapidly. And so the first stage usually of any kind of project is to try and validate the value of the technology that you might want to use. You have a problem you want to solve, you have a type of service you want to evolve to, you want to change your offer, you want to change your product, whatnot. You need to tackle that. And in order to address that need for a change, you need to build proof of concepts. And IoT is one of the areas where proof of concept might seem simple, but very rapidly become cumbersome, complex, hard. And you most often end up with an application, a solution that does not even prove the value of the technology to you and your business, or to you and your solution. If you're a maker, for example, and just want to do we're talking about like Christmas lighting, a solution that allows you to remotely control your Christmas lights and so on, you will end up with, maybe if you're not an expert in embedded development and so on, you will probably end up with, an LED that turns on and off and that you can control through a phone app or something. But from there to having an actual, application that lights up your house, reacts to music, and all the things you see on the internet, well, that's going to be complicated. So you need to start looking at what are the solutions that will make all these bits and pieces easier for me. So when it comes to prototyping a solution, you start at the device side of things, and then you build up to the cloud side of things, or you start from cloud and you go down to devices. But what I want to show you is starting from the device side of things. So let me bring up this tool. So embedded development might seem something that is complex because we are immediately talking about firmware, devices, hardware development, C++, assembly, all this kind of funny things. You might have approached IoT through things like Arduino or Raspberry Pi, which is great, but very rapidly you're just like, oh, what is that thing here? Oh, it's C. And oh, how do I interact with that little temperature sensor? Oh, it's I2C. Oh, what is I2C? Or I need to go play around with the GPIOs there. And oh, what is a GPIO? And then you start looking at the hardware, and you're gonna have to solve your thing, create your own circuits with breadboards and so on. And that's fun for sure, but that's time consuming. And you might end up with something that turns on the LED on and off, and not with your full Christmas light stuff for your house. So it's something that you might want to look at tools, and all the companies are there starting to look at how do they simplify this development phase. And here there's an interesting tool, which is based on Blocky, which is that Google framework for doing development using blocks. And they were like company M5 Stack. They were just like, hey, how about we use that to do hardware development? And so they have this kit called the M5 Go, and they have a bunch of hardware that are programmable using the UI Flow application you're seeing here, which is a web application. And the idea here is to just use blocks to create logic that will allow you to interact with the hardware of these devices. So here I have a little kit. Let me bring that up here. So this is the M5 Go. It's down there. It has a little screen. I did attach a motion sensor, a temperature humidity sensor to it. It is not wired, right? So here we have something which is connected through the Wi-Fi. You can see a little thing up there. It has a firmware. I just dragged and dropped to download it. And I was able to do a little program for that. But I will show you before the final program, something, which is how would you build something like that? And so you would do something that is pretty straightforward. You would just go in there and say, hey, I want to add a title to my application. This title here, as a title, that's okay. I want to add a label here, and that's the UI of my application, label 0. I will say temperature here, and that's going to be good enough. I'm going to bring a second label here. That will be the actual temperature we want to display. This label is going to be called, txt temp, for example. And you're seeing that I'm not doing any coding at all here. Everything a kid can do. That's basically what you would expect here. Let me make something bigger here so you can see what's going on. And so here I have a UI, right? And I can deploy that to my device over the cloud. This is a very convenient way. The device is a firmware that connects to the internet, connects to that backend service. There is a code here, an API key that allows this application to uniquely recognize the device. So if you wanted to, you could just copy that and mess up with my demo right now. And I know some of you might be willing to do that. Please don't. And here you see the application is down there and just working. All right, so it was deployed over the cloud and running down there. I have a UI on an embedded device, and it took me, a few minutes. It's like VB6 for IoT, exactly, Matthew. I think you got it right. But now let's do things that are a bit more funny. So let's actually connect some hardware. So I'm going to add to my application one of this hardware units. This is the environment 2. It's connected to one of the Grove connectors that are in there. So pretty practical because it's not a standard, but it's something that's very much used out there. And now I have this little guy here. I will be able to implement some code or logic that will grab the data from that sensor and display it on the screen. So here I will bring up a loop, and I will just do an infinite loop there. So I know there is another one somewhere. Let me see if it's never mind. I'll do just the manual one. Let's do, it's logic, right? I think there's the infinite loop while true in there. Never mind. Let me just do the loop here, and I will repeat or just do a while. Where's the while? Anyone played with that one recently? I think there was a while, but that's okay. I'll do an if and just do my loop like that. That's okay. Let's set up if, and then I'm going to have the logic. There will be a binary here, like, well, true, pretty straightforward. And then actually it won't work. Where's my freaking loop? I need to find that one. Sorry guys for that. Like hey, let's do something here. Nothing works. Where is the freaking while? They moved it. They changed that thing so often. Anyways, I'm gonna repeat that many times. That's okay. Oh, that's this one. My very bad. I'm so dumb today. That's because I'm already on vacation. Okay, so let me repeat while true something. Because I know that embedded devices are a bit touchy, let's immediately add a little weight that will make my loop not overwhelm the CPU and that little thing. Or the MCU. In that case, it's a microcontroller we have on that one. And what I need to do is get the temperature. And so the temperature will be available in units, right? I did bring that little one here, and in environment, I can get temperature, right? And that will be pretty much it. In my labels in the UI, I can set a label to a certain value. So basically, I'm going to show this value here, which would be the temperature, right? So, and that's pretty straightforward. The label I want to change is text temperature. And I'm just going to drag and drop the temperature here, and I'm going to deploy this application. And here, what I should see is that the actual temperature on that device changing and displayed on that label. So you see, it's pretty straightforward, and I was able to very rapidly create that little device that grabs the temperature displayed on the screen. Here you'll see something interesting called IoT Cloud. So no coding. I can go there and say, I want to connect to Azure. This is the Microsoft Cloud, right? You know, guys, you're familiar with that one. There is a set of services for IoT. One of them is called Azure IoT Central. And you'll see IoT Central is kind of a turnkey solution for IoT application development in the cloud. And I'll walk you through a couple of screens on that one and so on. But here on the device side of things, what I need to do is just bring in one of these blocks to initialize the connectivity to Azure IoT Central and then interact with the cloud from the device and vice versa. And so there's some concepts I won't explain today because it's definitely for another talk, but think of it as I'm going to be able to send data to the cloud called telemetry. I'll be able to eventually synchronize the state between my device and the cloud application and eventually send commands from the cloud down to the device. All of that provided through a communication protocol that is running on top of some industry standards like MQTT and others. MQTT itself on top of TCP that as a TLS stack, and TCP obviously is well known out there. All that secured and so on. Authentication is one of the key parts here. So let me load an actual piece of code that is already all done. So that way I won't spend too much time on that. So let me grab this IoT Central one. That will be this guy here. And you'll see a more complex block code here. And this one, if I can walk you through real quick, sets temperature, humidity locally on the device screen, and then we'll publish what we call a device to cloud message, which is the telemetry, packing all this information, temperature, humidity into a JSON file, and sending the information as JSON up to the cloud. And what I'm doing as well is I'm dealing with the motion sensor, like kind of funny things. And I also have next to it, a way to exchange my state from the device up to the cloud to indicate some of the, information about the buttons, about, the color of the LED lights are on the side of the device, and so on. So all of that is done here, and pretty much a buildup of what I did before, bringing on graphical pieces and hardware units in there, and then drag and dropping my blocks and then configuring them. Pretty straightforward. Let me switch to IoT Central, the cloud side of things. We're still in that world of prototyping, remember, right? And I didn't touch a line of code so far, and I intend to not do so for the duration of this demo. IoT Central is a place where you can create new application really rapidly. So rapidly that actually I'm going to show you that. I could do that. How many of you have already played with IoT Central? That's an interesting one here. And you can show of hand by just like pulling up your hands for a second, and we can see how many of you are familiar with IoT Central. And that will actually allow me to check if anyone is listening and if you can still hear me. And I'm going to pick a subscription. IoT Central definitely needs to have a subscription in the back end. Interestingly, though, IoT Central is free. And I can see we have John, pretty much John. Okay, not everyone. So that's cool because actually you can go ahead and go to Azure IoT Central rapidly and now and well, actually apps.azure-iotcentral.com and start creating your first application. So here I'm doing that. It's in between SaaS and PaaS. We call that a PaaS. So it's something that will look like a SaaS solution very much, and we'll make it something that has graphics, as devices in there, and so on. And then that is totally editable, totally parameterable, totally interactable. So it's something that you will want to try out. You can create different dashboards. It supports multi-tenancy. You have a bunch of things you can do in there. Definitely want to start your solutions in that direction. So all new to you. I'm glad this is the right talk then. So here in IoT Central, the first thing is you need to think, and that's something you might have encountered when you're working on the client-server architecture. You need the server side of things to be able to talk and understand what's going on, right? And so we have a notion of device model, device templates that define the model of what a device can do. And basically, you can define what capabilities the device have and what kind of commands it will support and so on. All of that in a format that on the software side of things for the device, you will implement so that there's compatibility here. There's a way of having that convention between the two worlds that allows you to seamlessly communicate at device and so on. So let me actually add a new template in here. Interestingly, you can create manually your model. You can say, hey, this device will have telemetry, temperature, humidity, and so on. But what you can do as well is leverage a catalog of existing devices that have been pre-configured. And they've been pre-configured, they've been pre-declared by the hardware manufacturers, and they've been certified for Azure IoT in a way that allows the customers to just choose and pick what they want and just add to their application. So here, for example, I have the Wii U terminal. I'm going to show you after. And I could just grab one of them and I'll go and randomly pick one. Let me say I want to go with that Advantech AIM B blah, blah, blah device. And I'm going to review that, at a very high level, and then just create that model here in my application. I've never tried that one, so we'll see what it looks like. So here I can see that it has a model built with different interfaces. The interfaces describe the information that the device will expose. The sensors information, voltage, blah, blah, blah. You see tons of things here, GPIO, which you are able to interact, set pin, get pin, and so forth. And eventually, you also have visuals. So here they've been pre-built in that model I got from the catalog. And here you can see voltage, you can see a bunch of things that will allow me to interact with that device from my control panel here. So here I have my model have been imported to my application. Now we'll go to my set of devices, and you see there's no device here. Obviously, no device has been connected yet. Let me do that. Let me create a new device. What you're doing here, you're creating credentials for a device to come up and connect to my cloud application. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the yes with that simulate this device. Because we have this convention that allows to declare the capabilities of a device for an application to understand, you're able to simulate devices pretty easily. So first step for prototyping, no hardware, pretty easy. So I'm going to create that new device in my application. And now I have this fake device, and the simulation that is managed by the service in the backend will start sending data and allow me to interact with that data, pretending there's an actual device behind. So it's going to take like a second for, the simulator to kick off and come in here. So let me go back to my home screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to another application I already created before to connect my little M5 stack device that is waiting just here and just for now sending temperature. In here, I have, that device has been created. I've been working on that model. Let me show you the model for that device. And you'll see things that you've seen on the device side of things. So here I said, I'm going to have a temperature, a humidity, and a movement detected as the telemetry type of capabilities. I also said I'm going to have a couple of commands, sound alarm, a buzz, and then I have the RGB properties that will allow me to change colors on that device. So I declared that here, no code. Once again, everything is up here. And the device itself is sending this data and interacting with my cloud application with that format that has been predefined. So I'm going to go to my device, and here you see nothing because the device itself is not connected. Let me make it happen. All right. So let me scroll up here on my little blocky diagram. Here I have the credentials for that device I need to fill in. There's several information. There's one which is this what we call a scope ID, which is a unique identifier for the application, which is mine. There's a device ID, and then there's a key. And the key itself is something that let me actually move that little guy here. The key itself is something that the application will generate, and it will be used to encrypt the data, to authenticate and then encrypt the data over TLS between the device and the cloud. So TLS encryption, authentication using that key could be searched as well. That works with X509 search, so you have options there. So if I go to my application here, I hit connect. This is where I will grab my credentials. And if everything is correct, this should be the right key. I'll just double check that. Let me see if it looks familiar. It does look familiar, doesn't it? No, it's not the same one. It changed. Yay. So good that I checked that. Otherwise, you would have that weird, hey, it doesn't work. Okay, so I should be fine here. I'm going to make sure I have the right scope ID as well, because I might not be pointing to the right application for now. There you go. And it's called My M5 Go. That's the name of the device here. Okay. So like copy paste for now, no code at all on any side of the story. And I'm going to deploy that little thing on my application. And you'll see deployment happening over the cloud. The device is now running the app. We should see temperature, humidity popping up here. And what I should see on my application is the device being now connected and data starting flowing to my IoT Central application, right? So you see a bunch of things happening on that device. Let's see closer real quick. So temperature, humidity, and then you have down there, I did lock. Let me make sure you see what's going on there real quick. Sorry for that. Properties for my camera. Let me unlock the zoom and focus. Okay, focus. Let's try that. There you go. It's gonna be neater, right? Apply. Okay. So now you should see what's going on, right? Okay, and if I switch back to this little guy here, screen, device, and me, right? And I'll go to my IoT Central application. Let me close that. And you can see now that I have temperature, humidity has been starting to pop up here. And I can start doing things. So let me try and run a buzz for 3 seconds, for example. It's going to send a command to the device. The device will receive the command, and it did buzz. And here, you could see that the only thing I had to do in my application is to say the device supports that type of command. And on the code side of thing, let me show you real quick. Thanks to that graphical way of doing, I was able to very easily connect that command to that buzzer. And so let me go here. There's a subscribe for direct method. And this is this one called buzz. And this one, when I receive it on the device side of thing, I'm just connecting to that speaker API or whatever it's called through that block and say I'm going to do a 1 second or 1,000 millisecond by the actual data that is coming to me, which was the 3 seconds here. And that's pretty much it, right? And you could have a response from the application on the device side of things back to the cloud app and so on if you wanted to. I didn't want to do that right now, but you could do that for sure. Another thing I could eventually do is to change properties. So let me go here. There's an LED light around the device. Let me try and switch it to, let's say, green, for example. Let's see if it works. I'm going to save that, and you should see the greenish light coming out here. And it was pretty instant, right? It was something that just popped up here. And you can see here I have a response. The device accepted my property change on the device. So that means that I can know from the cloud side of things that I can interact with that little thing. So that's pretty much, that prototyping stage here. I want to show you another thing which is very interesting, which is called IoT plug and play. So I talked to and went through showing you real quick, hey, here's telemetry and here is that and here is this. And that's pretty cool. But all of that can be automated even further. Instead of having to manually create these models, as I showed you initially, picking from a catalog a model and then having a device that is compatible with that model and able to send data and interact with the application is definitely one way. One technology that we are working on developing and trying to make more pervasive, more available, and more adopted by everyone is IoT plug and play. Try and define a way of for hardware manufacturers to create these models and then publish them on a repository that cloud application can go and shop from. And that's exactly what IoT plug and play is about. So here I'm going to switch to another device. I have a little Wii U terminal here. And this Wii U terminal, I've been setting it up with some credentials for this same application. But let me first show you one thing. Here in my device templates on that IoT Central application, I only have the M5 Go, none other. I could go here and say new and add one from the catalog and pick up that Wii U terminal that I just pointed to. So it should be somewhere in here. Yeah, there you go, Wii U terminal. And so the application would then be able to interact with that device. But I don't want to do that like manually. What I want to do is automate all of that. And what's going on is I was able to flash on the device a plug and play compatible firmware. So we have SDKs and so on for hardware manufacturers to build that. And what I'm doing here in the settings of my application, I will go and fetch settings that are provided generically for device manufacturers to be able to configure, basically plant a seed on the device that will be a secure seed that the application will be able to recognize. So here I have what we call an enrollment group. And I picked up the ID scope, and there is a key that is a primary key that the device can be aware of and can use to come up to the application, authenticate, and then appear in the application. When coming up through that authentication process, the device will declare its model ID. Model ID is been published in the catalog for the Azure IoT certified devices, and the application will bring down the model, add it to my application, and the device will then connect and start sending data, and I will have a dashboard pre-populated. So if everything works correctly, we'll be good. I did pre-populate with these keys and information the device itself through a little interface over serial, right? So I configured Wi-Fi. I configured a way for my device to connect to this application using the scope ID and so forth. And now what I'm going to do is turn that device on. It will hopefully connect to Wi-Fi. Do that. And once it's connected to Wi-Fi, it will connect to the provisioning service, which is behind IoT Central, and it will get its credentials for the IoT Central application, which will grab the model ID, which is, you see, has been imported here in my application instantly, and add the device itself, which is Wii U Olivier here, right? And the device is already starting to send its telemetry, right? And so telemetry 1, 2, and here I'll be able to see XYZ on that device, and it's going to show up here in a second, and it will show the last known data, and I will be able to send commands. So for example, if I do that, run, the device will receive the command and will run that command. We'll see if it did receive it. Oh, I don't have any speaker connected to it, so yes, that's a good one. But it did receive that command, arrived, and telemetry continues flowing in there. You can see it's in there. So without touching anything here, I was able to go from application in the cloud, no device, or the previous device, but not this one, device connecting, getting Wi-Fi, like connecting to Wi-Fi, getting online, presenting its credentials to the provisioning service, being identified as an authorized device, being given the credentials to connect to a specific IoT Central application based on that scope ID, with a specific key that the device was able to derive, and then encrypt its communication with my IoT Central application. And boom, the device is there, and now you can work with it. From here, IoT Central is allowing you to do a lot of very interesting things. You have this way you can create queries to do analytics on the data. You can also implement rules. If I wanted to have, for example, for a specific device like the M5 Go, for example, a rule on if a specific condition for, let's say, humidity is greater than let's say a value that would be, I don't know, 75%. I didn't check what the temperature or the humidity was. Let's do 80%. Do an action, and the action could be a bunch of things here. You could send an email, trigger a webhook. You can send information to Azure Monitor, Power Automate, Logic Apps, a bunch of things you can do in here. So you could do that in here. If you have specific rules you want to implement, for a device itself, you can go to that device. You can go to the to the device template. You can check out this guy here. You can go for one of the telemetry information, and then you can say, I'm going to set up a rule for that, and you can implement that rule there. So these are the few of the many things you can do in there. Another interesting thing is, the way you can export your data. The IoT Central should be seen as something that allows you to manage your devices. By the way, it has a set of APIs, right? So everything I showed you graphically can be done using APIs as well. And then what you can do is export all or part of the data coming from devices to something else, to a data explorer, to an event hub, to a Logic app, to other thing, Events Grid, for example, right? And so there's something you can set up, in here as what we call a data export. You can define a new set of destination. Let me add a new destination. Could be an event hub, as I was saying. Data Explorer can send to a webhook as well, putting the data into the body of a webhook message. And so forth. Data Explorer is a good one here. And then you enter the information, you have a destination. Once you've done that, you are able to set up export rules. You create an export, you select what kind of data, telemetry, properties, and so on. You can enrich the data from within IoT Central, and you can send it to one of various destinations. Pretty practical and powerful over here. Once again, no code, everything in IoT Central, pretty straightforward. So as a matter of fact, if you want to leverage all that technology in a more granular way, you can use Azure IoT Hub and other technology that are behind. So this is my first set of demo prototyping, which already shows you a lot of the technology that are available as services packaged, available for you. We're seeing here a device that is programmed using an interface which is graphical. That was for fun with M5 Go. This Wii U terminal here, the application has been developed using Arduino IDE. Use C code. There's a library in there since yesterday, actually, that allows you to connect to Azure IoT seamlessly and pretty easily on some boards that are compatible with your Arduino IDE, the ESP32, the 8266, and for now the Realtek Amoeba D. So these are the three boards that are three types of chips that are supported, but more are coming. But in a nutshell, using the IDE there. But we do have SDKs that you can leverage. Obviously, embedded C SDK, but you can also leverage, other languages, Java or JavaScript or C# as well, to create your devices, applications, and it can run on Windows, Linux, or real-time OSs for the embedded C SDK. So you can definitely code your devices and make them super sophisticated and interacting with the cloud seamlessly, leveraging IoT plug and play, the SDKs that have all the features in there, and so forth. On the cloud side of things, it's Azure. You guys know it. Once you have the data up there and you have a way to communicate down to the devices, you're almost golden. So that's something that I want to teach you here, because once you have these touch points, these endpoints, you guys know what to do from there. But integrating your IoT solution into an existing app, this is the way you would do that. One thing I want to bring up as well, something that might talk to you as well a bit more, is the user management. IoT Central allows you to create different types of users that have access to different areas of the IoT Central application. So that's something that will allow you to say, this is an operator, he cannot add new device. It cannot do anything else, or they cannot do anything else. They can just visualize the data and eventually send a command to a device. Then you can say this person is the factory manager, whatnot, and so they can do more. They can add new devices. They can have access to a set of dashboards that are only visible to them on that application. The notion of organization is the multi-tenancy infrastructure. It's part of IoT Central. All that is managed for you, available there, integrated into AAD for user management and so forth. So definitely pretty straightforward, very useful, and allows you to not have to deal with all of that IoT thing, which is the connection, the security, the integration into your application. And as some comments are coming up here, it's pretty straightforward. Yes. So people are already spending their money on these kits. I'm glad I have any interest in doing that myself. I should do that. Put a link that is a paying link. I don't know, something like that. I want to open up. I have another discussion topic here, which is more about bringing the AI to the cloud, but I want to open up for some questions here. Anyone have reactions on what's going on here? Okay, so I'm looking at IoT platforms, and one of the greatest engine I see is around over-the-year updates. Interesting. Yes, over-the-year updates is definitely something which can be challenging. So here is a way of coping with that. So first one, there are existing third parties. Mender.io is a good example of an open source solution that allows you to do over-the-year updates. You can also leverage an infrastructure that we have within Azure IoT Central. Let me bring back that screen of mine. And within IoT Central, you have features for the connectivity and communication with devices that allow you to build on top and have a notion of device update and device management. But there is also a discrete service called the Azure Device Update that pairs with the IoT Hub service, which is that gateway for devices, which is behind IoT Central, and that allows you to implement at scale these device updates over the year, where your devices will check in, will leverage the property synchronization or state synchronization, which is provided by Azure IoT Hub, and will allow you to download down to the device a file. There's a file upload and download feature that the device can leverage. And using all these discrete parts, you're able to start campaigns of device updates the same way you would do that on Windows or Linux machines, but on IoT devices, leveraging the IoT Hub communication on the device to the cloud and so forth. So this is something that's definitely top of mind addressed. So that's something you can use all the features of Azure IoT to do that, Azure Device Update, Azure IoT Hub, and so forth. And you'll see here in IoT Central, if you want to go that path, you have a notion of jobs that allow you to do that. You can create jobs that will be campaigns of parametering or setting things on devices remotely. They can do from here. So if I do my job here in IoT Central, I can put a description. I will pick the organization if I had set up the organization. Target devices, let me go for all the devices that are DM5 Go. And the job type could be a command, a property, a cloud property. So if I want to change a property and say, I'm going to set the property firmware update to on, I'm going to do that. Device will have firmware updates. And then eventually the software on the device will go and pick up its update from somewhere. If I want to send a command like trigger device update, I can send that as well. Or if I want to send a command, download the firmware from here, I can use that here and create a job that will orchestrate the device update for me. I just mentioned Mender.io. There are other solutions out there. There are third-party solutions that can be paired with Azure IoT in a way that allows you to have a device management on one side and your IoT gateway and integration into the cloud on the other one. So the name is Mender.io, MENDER.io. You have other services out there. This is just an example. It came to mind because we talked to them yesterday. So they have an interesting integration with Azure IoT coming up. That will be early January, I think, something like that. So yeah, device update definitely is top of mind there. So another topic that I think I have like some more time to discuss that. You just stop me, John, when I'm too long. But one topic is AI at the edge in particular. So one thing that IoT allows you to do is to bring the intelligence of the cloud to the edge. That's one of the things that you want to do because devices might not be always connected. So Darren has his hand up. Darren, you have a question for me? You can unmute if you want.
Thanks, Olivier. Thanks
Yeah.
For a great session. I've just got a question around security because I can imagine with our customers, if we're in if they're considering IoT and we're considering deploying IoT for them, the first question they probably ask is how does end-to-end security work? And I just wondered, is there a kind of almost like an elevator pitch to describe how end-to-end security works for this technology?
Yes. So there's different levels, and we do cover security at all levels, and that's what's interesting. From the device side of things, where you can leverage TPMs and others to store your credentials connecting to the cloud in a way that is secure. You can leverage confidential compute as well locally on devices. From device to cloud, authentication, encryption of the communication over TLS is a must-have. You cannot connect a device to Azure IoT without encrypting, without using TLS. And you cannot connect a device without it having a unique credentials that allows the cloud service to uniquely identify each of these devices. Then when it comes to the end-to-end solution, the integration of the IoT solution within Azure Defender is there. There's Azure Defender for IoT, which is a very advanced way of monitoring and managing the security on your IoT networks or on the IoT part of your networks. Where you would very simply install what we call an Azure IoT sensor or there's another name for that. But basically, you add this little box on your network. You don't even need to add agents running on the devices themselves. That device added to your network will start monitoring what's going on and will work with Azure Defender to identify potential threats. You can create rules there and so forth. So total integration of the IoT infrastructure into Azure Defender to allow you to have this full control over the overall infrastructure in one place, one pane of glass to have all your security across the board managed. So that's in a nutshell where we're standing. Security is top of mind and is all over the place, all the way from authentication of a device to encryption of the data to monitoring and alerting the operators, the users, the owners of the apps, integration into first class and top cloud solutions like Azure Defender. And we can go into details here and there into what's done, but it's always and systematically security first, because that's the mantra. That's the one thing that we think is critical and important. But today, for example, yesterday I did tweet about this new Arduino library, and rapidly I added a comment as an addendum to make sure people are not confused. In order to connect the device directly to Azure IoT Hub or Central, there is a minimum set of requirements. You need to support TLS, so you need to be able to have a TLS tag on that device. And there's other things that you have to do in order to be able to connect that require having a certain size of device or devices that are not too tiny, because like tinier devices like an Arduino Uno will not be able to connect because they don't have the right stacks or the hardware that will allow you to run that kind of stacks to connect to Azure IoT directly. So infrastructures that leverage gateways is definitely the path that we recommend. And you can then use the gateway and the features that our runtime for gateways called Azure IoT Edge offer. And I wanted to mention IoT Edge as my next talking point here. That's a nice segue. So IoT Edge is a technology that allow you not just to power a gateway and streamline the connectivity of tinier devices that may be behind a firewall, not have TLS capabilities, or actually not even being like TCP devices or IP devices. Could be running on LoRa networks, could be running on BLE, could be running on Modbus, BACnet, CAN, other of these field buses that are used in the industry and different other domains. But the gateway itself will be able to pass through, or with IoT Edge as a runtime, we'll be able to run workflows you will be developing in the cloud and deploying to these gateways. Gateways running Linux or Windows, a bigger device on your infrastructure that allow you to have control all the way down the ramification of your IoT infrastructure. Once again, security at core of it, IoT Edge leverages TPM for confidential compute, as well as storing credentials and so forth. It can be used to identify these leaf devices as well, even if they're not IP-based in different ways. And as an infrastructure based on Docker containers, allows you to very dynamically configure these gateways at scale from the Azure IoT Cloud. And so that's the next one. I wanted to show a quick demo about this notion of distributing your intelligence at the edge, which might seem complicated when you think about running machine learning on tinier devices and so on. It might indeed seem like something that is not trivial. That said, thanks to technologies, and we're not the only ones doing that, but technology that Microsoft provides, such as Azure IT Edge combined with IT Hub or IT Central, you can very easily do that. Azure Percept is a good example that uses and combines these technologies to make it easier to deploy AI at the edge. So here we have Azure Percept Studio that is open. I have an Azure Percept device kit, dev kit, sorry, which is just behind me here, right? So this is like central unit, which is running a Linux distribution, Linux OS that Microsoft builds, called Mariner OS. Here we have a set of microphones, and here we have a camera that is connected to that guy here. That guy is connected to Azure IoT Hub, and I'm able from there to actually deploy intelligence onto that device. Right now, I have Azure IT Edge running on that device, and that's out of the box. And I can configure that through the Azure Percept Studio. This device is connected through an IT Hub instance on my cloud. And it's now running a model, which is the example one, which is an object detection. So it sees there's a TV monitor behind me. It detects me as a person. It sees there's a laptop on my table here. I can make it a bit bigger so you can see what's going on. It thinks there's a bottle. This is not bottles, but this looks like a bottle, so it's not too bad. But from here, the interesting thing is, how would I go about changing the way that device works? And because we're using Docker containers, we have this notion of modules that the runtime manages and orchestrate communication between. We're able to say, I want to change that module that does the inference on this device based on the camera stream, and that will score these images and then send something up to the cloud as a message saying, hey, I detected that or this. And then we can change only that thing here. So here I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to create a prototype, and I'm going to say I'm going to try one of the vision examples, right? Percept Studio is a UI that you could develop yourself or just leverage, but it's really a nice example of a solution that leverages all the Azure IoT technologies in order to implement something. So, for example, if I switch to people detection, I want to detect only people. I want to stop detecting all the objects around it. So I have a model that's been prepared for me already. This is there. I'm going to show you after, how easy it can be to create your own one. The device is receiving a command telling, hey, load a new model. Now you need to load that new model. The model has been deployed to some registry, and now it's been, downloaded to the device, and the device is only detecting persons. Pretty straightforward from the cloud, deploying the intelligence on the device. It was like pretty straightforward, right? Now, if I wanted to create a new vision prototype, create my own model, I could create a new project here. It will, the Percept Studio will interact with cognitive services on Azure in order to create a new vision model based on images coming from that device, and me scoring the images to detect things in there. So if I call it detect coffee mug, for example, in my description is going to be something random. I'm going to create a new resource on cognitive services for that to happen. Need a resource group here. Let me change the subscription to the one I've been using for the demos. Let me go there real quick. I will create a new or use an existing resource group. I will go West US. It's going to be closer here. And I'm going to go with a free tier for now. And I'm missing a name. Olivier's demo, something like that. Yay, name is available. Let me create that resource on cognitive services. If you have not used cognitive services on Azure, perfectly fine. It's pretty straightforward for some of these packaged, I would say, ways of creating things. So here you see, I have an interface that I could go directly to cognitive services and set up that project, but I can do that from Percept Studio because it's dedicated to my scenario. I can do the object detection or image classification. Is going to leverage different types of cognitive service, and I will optimize for accuracy. Let me go and create that project. I will pick the IoT Hub. I only have one here in my subscription, and the DK is this guy here. And what I can do is automatically capture things in there. I'm going to get a frame every 5 seconds until I have 25 of them. And so that's something that is pretty great because I can grab the images directly from the device that will do the inference on these images after the model has been deployed there. I'm going to set an automatic capture, and I don't know, I'm going to just bring up the mug here, and the guy is actually now getting these shots one every 5 seconds, and I think this is set up, and I can continue, evaluate, and deploy. So here I have this little guy, and there is an iteration. Okay, so let me see where we're at with this image capture, blah, blah, blah. I said define, blah, 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 set automatic capture. Okay, should be good here. So the image capture is in progress. I think we'll see what happens after. But then I can switch to my model and I can go and train it in the custom vision UI. So let me go to that custom vision UI. So hopefully it's capturing images. I don't think we'll have time to do the whole shebang thing, but let's try and see what's going on here. So that's the custom vision AI, customvision.ai, right? Pretty straightforward. And it should already have some images that have been captured here, and we'll continue adding more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and graphically, I'm going to pick that thing here and call it mug, right? Boom, plus. I'm going to go to next photo. I'm going to select this guy here, and I'm going to say mug again, right? So I'm tagging the image to indicate where the objects are so that it can train. Here there's no mug, and etc. Right? So the new images are coming in, and I'll be able to tag them as they come. You see the first two ones are tagged here, and it's going to take some time because I need to have like something like 25 of them. At the end of that, I can hit train. It's going to train that model in the cloud. And once the model is trained, I will be able to deploy it from Percept Studio onto my Percept device. So once again, no code. I'm able to gather images from my device to train a new Vision AI model for detecting a specific object in the frame, and then integrate that into my my device or run it on my device. So pretty straightforward. Once again, no code. Percept allows you to do that with vision, with audio. There's tons of very interesting scenario. We have other videos about that, but that's really a nice way to illustrate how simple you can make IoT by putting together existing platforms, existing technologies, and aggregating them into your solution without having to reinvent the wheel, leveraging things that integrate seamlessly, that are security first in mind, implemented, and so forth. One other important thing is that here I'm showing lots of things running only Microsoft stuff, but you can definitely leverage a bunch of technologies that are out there that are non-Microsoft, open source solutions, things that are provided by partners as services on Azure. I was mentioning Mender. We have other partners. The Things Network is another one, the community that creates LoRa infrastructure, which is like low power, long range communication technology specifically for IoT devices. You have a way of integrating a LoRa infrastructure into Azure IoT pretty seamlessly. All of these are things that we want to work on and deliver to make IoT simple, all the way from proof of concept to going to scale. Because that's the next step. Once you have your proof of concept, you validated the value that IoT can bring to your business. Then you need to go to scale, and scaling is not easy. Millions of devices, different types of devices, different installers, different partners you have to work with, different providers, vendors, or so on. And so these are things that have been sorted out or addressed in different domains that now are available for you in the IoT domain as well, for you to build your solutions leveraging these entities, these solutions, these partners, and these technologies that we provide over here. So that was a very fast, hey, IoT is complex. It is not that complex at the end of the day. It's software running on client devices and interacting with a server, right? Which is hosted in Azure. And by having all these services delivered to you guys, you're able to go fast and build solutions without having to reinvent the wheel here. So hopefully that was interesting. If you have questions, I'm here to answer them.
That was awesome. Olivier, thank you so much for that. I think, yeah, we've had a few questions in the chat room there, but you know, I think you're available across the social platforms. I'm guessing if people do have questions after the event to track you down, we'll put your there we go. Your Twitter handle is on the screen there.
I cannot escape. And oblock@microsoft.com is the email as well, so you know where to find me.
No, I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for giving up your time and coming on this. It's always awesome. IoT is very close to my heart. Thanks, Olivier. It was great to see some of that awesome stuff that's going on. And I said in the chat earlier on, I think you've just cost me about another £300 in gadgets that I now have to go and buy.
I'm sorry.
So yeah,
I'm sorry. It's Christmas though, right?
Link sorted.
and you were about to say that you're offering the same one to everyone here on the call. That's what you said, right? Yeah.
I'm saying nothing more. I'm saying nothing more. Get myself into trouble.
Awesome. No, okay. Well, thanks for having me.
Come off. No, absolutely. If everybody wants to show their appreciation, thanks very much, Olivier. And yeah, have a great festive season. Enjoy the break.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one. See you. Bye.
Okie dokie. So yeah, huge thanks to Olivier for that super chat on IoT Simplified. So hopefully you can see, I mean, you know, how simple Microsoft have made things now from IoT Central and, you know, incorporating IoT devices for your business needs. It's super stuff. Okay, so I know Mr. Mike Pfieffer has joined the chat. I can see him there lurking in the wings. I'm pretty sure this guy needs no introduction in the tech community. It's fantastic to have him here joining us at Welsh Azure Use Group. Mike, if you're there, we'll hand straight on over to you.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear, Mike.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So you guys ready for me to share my screen and kick it off?
Yeah, you carry on there, Mike. That's cool.
Beautiful. All right, give me 1 second here. All right. You should be seeing slides. Can you confirm for me?
Yeah, you're there. Can see you
there
now.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming to this talk today. I wanted to do something that would send us into the new year kind of on a good vibe, right? So for myself and for you guys, I'm kind of thinking about 2022, right? So I wanted to do a talk today on taking ownership over your career. I'll explain a lot of the stuff that I've been through over the last 20 years and how I'm thinking about this for 2022. I am going to share both hard skills and soft skills in terms of recommendations on how I might think about this. One of the things that I've been working on the last couple of weeks is I've been mapping out like a bunch of new career paths for some new content that we're doing in 2022. If you guys don't know me, anybody that doesn't know me, I run cloudskills.io. We're an online training platform. Very heavy on the Azure. We started doing a lot of AWS this year and a lot of DevOps stuff this year. Next year, we got some big updates. And so I've been mapping out like career paths and stuff, and I'm really thinking a lot about how would I explain to somebody that's completely brand new how to navigate a career? And I'm also thinking now about like, how would I explain to somebody else that's been in IT for a while? And so I'm trying to hit multiple targets with this talk today. I think a lot of you are probably already in the industry and working and stuff like that. So I think that, you know, I think what I have to share, some of it will probably be obvious, but on the technical side, but I think that it'll spark some good Q&A. And the last time I did a talk like this, it really kicked off a lot of Q&A. So feel free to like load up some questions. I'm happy to, you know, exchange answers with you guys here at the end. Just a little bit of background about me. You might know me already as a Microsoft MVP or a host of the Cloud Skills FM podcast. What I wanted to share was some stuff about my background. So when I first started in 1999, when I was on the help desk, I was studying Novell NetWare. So like one of the very first places I got a job was AOL, America Online. And that was in 98. And I was kind of doing some tech stuff, but I was also doing customer service. So it was kind of like my first foray into tech. And then I worked at Gateway Computers. And that's when I really started doing like heavy technical stuff. And everybody in my ecosystem, in my environment back then that I knew, especially the guys that I knew from school that were a couple years ahead of me, they were all crushing it, working on Novell NetWare. They were just like making tons of money. They were getting all the best jobs and stuff. So in 99, when I was working at Gateway, I was like, all right, I'm going to go down and double down on NetWare I'm going to get, and everybody at the time was getting, a CNE certified Nobel engineer. It's like a big flagship certification at the time. And if you had that cert, you can make a ton of money. And so I was studying for that, and I was kind of just like listening to all my friends, right? But the problem was I hated NetWare. I couldn't stand it. And I only had like one white box machine that I'd built by myself by buying parts in 1999. And I couldn't get the NetWare drivers to load for the NIC that I had in that machine. And it was just like driving me nuts. So finally I was like, screw this. I can't study something that I don't have access to at work and I can't set up at home in my lab. Well, I had access to Windows NT4 at work, and I figured out how to get it to run at home. A lot of people don't know that VMware started in 1999 as well. So not too long after that VMware started, I was able to run stuff in virtual environments, and I went down to Windows NT Road, and that's like obviously worked very well for me. I remember there was a guy that I worked with at the time when I was telling him, it's like, I don't know about NetWare, man. I think I'm going to go down the Windows NT Road. And he was just like, huge mistake, don't do it. And I remember I kept going back and forth with him for like a couple weeks. And anyways, a couple years later, I didn't work with him anymore. So like 4 or 5 years later, I was at a 7-Eleven, and he was the like security guard at the 7-Eleven. So, I'm glad I didn't take that guy's advice. Nothing against him, right? I just wish he would have like saw what was coming down the pike. So fast forward to 2006, I was working as an enterprise consultant, and I was flying all over the country. I was doing merger and acquisition projects. So when companies buy another company, or you acquire, you merge with another company, you acquire somebody, there's always like a ton of integration work, right? I bet a lot of people on this call have had to deal with that in projects in the past. But I was doing a lot of Active Directory migrations, Exchange migrations, AD Forest consolidation projects, and I was just like, I was doing everything point and click, and it was burning me out, right? So I was doing these huge enterprise migrations. The only code that I could really write at the time was VB script, because in 99, 2000, 2001, I on the side would always like build websites. I learned HTML, and I learned classic ASP, which used VB script, right? So that's all I really knew. But in 2006, I was like, geez, man, I'm okay with VB script, but that's not the greatest, scripting solution. I really need to get hardcore in programming so I can automate all this stuff. And right around that time is when Microsoft was introducing the Monad shell into Exchange 2007, which was in beta. And everybody that I knew that was an Exchange admin or an AD administrator was just like, most people, I'd say 90%, 9 out of 10 people I knew, they were just like, screw this sucks, I don't want to do this. And a lot of you probably already know that Monad ended up, that was the code name for PowerShell before it was released to manufacturing a couple years later. But in that era, like, I didn't see that as a downside. I saw that, Microsoft rebuilding the entire Exchange product on PowerShell, right, to have like an API first, then slap a GUI on it. That really made a lot of sense to me. And I was like, I'm doubling down. I'm doubling down on programming. So I got hardcore into .NET and C#. That really helped me understand how PowerShell worked. I went deep into PowerShell, and there was a lot of people at that time that were not doing that and were fighting that, and they kind of lost in that era, right? So that's kind of like another thing that I did. And then in 2013, I found myself working at Microsoft. All my Exchange and Active Directory work up to that point had, primed me for a position in the field. I was working in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and all my customers were in Silicon Valley. So I had customers like Juniper Networks, and Cisco was one of my customers. I was like a dedicated engineer for these huge companies, right? But I was kind of getting tired of Exchange, and I saw what Microsoft was doing with Office 365, and I could just see the writing on the wall. I was like, well, if I continue to go down the road of Exchange, that's going to really change my outlook, right? And the things I'm doing in my career in the next couple of years. So I was kind of uncertain where that was headed. And so I bailed, and I went to AWS to work as a solutions architect, right? Because I could tell even in 2013, all right, this cloud thing is going to be a huge deal. So the reason I share all this right off the bat is that I'm always betting on technology. Like, what's the next thing coming? I'm always obsessing over that, all right? And the reason I'm doing that, right, is the kind of the point of this talk. Taking ownership over your career. What does ownership, the definition, actually mean? Well, it's the act, state, or right of possessing something. And I think a lot of times people forget that they're in possession of their career. It's yours, right? If we look back, like to when my dad was working in corporate, the model, right, for baby boomers was go work somewhere 40, 30 years, whatever, and retire and enjoy the rest of your time. And corporate has changed a lot, right, over the last several decades. These days, the gig economy is exploding. The creator economy is exploding. There's less and less benefits, right, from corporations. And then, people are staying less or they're not staying as long at jobs as they used to, right? And so because of all that, like, it's very hard to just put your trust in your employer to take care of your career. So you got to, like, in my opinion, getting what you want out of work in your career, it doesn't have to suck, right? It could be really fun. But it requires strategy and just kind of taking ownership of your career and deciding what's the long-term plan going to be. Okay. So that's my kind of my idea with this talk. So in 2022, what would I focus on in terms of hard skills? So I got 7 kind of core domains that I'll share with you today. All right. So my technical strategy, and I think this is solid for anybody that's working in cloud. Number 1 is going to be to focus in the area of just cloud foundations. And I think one of the things that we're starting to see is DevOps and SRE and whatever that's going to end up really being called in the long run. And it's all just kind of getting merged into cloud engineering, The other big thing is multi-cloud. And that's something that we're working on my team right now. Like I said, we're mapping out all these like career paths and stuff. I got a big announcement I'm going to do in January. I've been talking about this for a while. It keeps getting pushed out, but I promise in January we'll make a huge announcement. But along with all the learning paths and career paths I've been building out, we're building out certifications. So we're going to have actual certifications on multi-cloud administration for things that combine Azure and AWS. So I think long term, right, that multi-cloud awareness is just going to be really important. So many IT teams, sometimes they choose multi-cloud, but oftentimes it chooses them, right? And all these different departments are sometimes going off on their own direction. And just being able to have the conversation and understand, over in AWS, a virtual machine is called an EC2 instance. And instead of a, storage account, I'm using an S3 service and a bucket. And, all those things, mapping the terminology that in one platform to another. Knowing your way around an operating system. Obviously, Linux is kind of taking charge, right? So understanding some Linux basics especially, but also Windows. Another place in the core domain of just cloud engineering is a networking piece. I see that, most people are deer in headlights in that. So if you would spend, a few hours or maybe a couple days just finally remembering or going back or learning from scratch IP addressing and subnetting and understanding, when I go in to build a VNet, why is it picking this address range? What does that actually mean? Spending the time to do that is going to really reduce your anxiety working in tech, okay? Because especially in cloud, there's networking stuff all over the place. And then finally, like the cloud governance stuff, right? So kind of like I've been saying for years, if you've been listening to me for a few years, storage or compute, storage, networking, and identity, right, is kind of like first core domain. And I would continue to chip away in there. And then, don't worry so much about being an expert in every cloud. Know one cloud well, right? And then understand the second one, at least map what in the good one or the primary one over the other. So that's kind of basic, right? Next domain, I would say shell scripting and programming. So again, I think that a lot of people overthink this one, right? They're like, there's a fork in the road. I don't know any of the stuff. So like, which one do I pick? It doesn't matter as much, right? So, what I would do is, and this kind of depends on where you're at right now, right? I'm strong on PowerShell right now, stronger on PowerShell than I'm on Bash. So it's kind of like, I'm kind of, in my opinion, from a shell scripting perspective, I could figure out in Bash the equivalent stuff that I do in PowerShell if I need to, right? So I'm not going to personally spend a lot of time in 2022 on shell scripting because I kind of got that covered. However, I've been programming in Python for the past few days, and my PowerShell and C# knowledge has really helped me, right? So, that's one of the reasons why I say get good at one language, because once you get really good at one, and you guys have heard this, I know, you get good at one, and then you take what you know in the other one and map it over. I've just been doing this last few days. I've been doing all this Python coding. And honestly, if if I would have had the option to pick a language, I would have picked PowerShell because I can just, I can just write PowerShell without even hardly thinking. But I didn't have that option, right? So I had to use Python. And the good news is, since I know PowerShell so well, I was like, in Python, I'm like, well, what's the right syntax again to do conditional logic? And how do I iterate over a list? And how do I get values out of a dictionary and all that kind of stuff? I knew how to do that in PowerShell. I just had to figure it out in Python, right? So don't get paralyzed by options. Just pick something and get in the game. Maybe you started PowerShell because you've worked in a Windows environment, but you're still not familiar with it. Double down on that one. Learn the learn the, how commands work in the different modules and stuff, how the language works itself, flow control and compare, conditional logic and variables, all that kind of stuff. That's why I put computer science 101 concepts in here. So, ultimately what you want to do is you want to be able to open a shell somehow and write a script and run a command and get something to go. You want to also be able to write some more advanced code, right? In either Python or Go, even C# would be good, like a true programming language, just to have some awareness. And then, the computer science 101 concepts fold into that. And the reason I think that this is important is not only because automation is just like obviously taking over, but being able to communicate with the folks on your team, even if you don't, as a resource, as a technical person, contributor, even if you don't build programs and write code all day, having the awareness and being able to communicate with other people in that space, huge difference, right? So moving to the next domain, here I would go into source control. Reason I'm coming through these ones, you guys, is because the people that I do talk to tend to, the new people or the people that are moving into cloud, they tend to be, needing to level up in these areas. So I'm bringing these up. These might be places you've already done some work. I think you've got the note, right? The memo that GitHub is kind of a big deal. Working with version control, source control is kind of a big deal. So it's time to learn Git if you haven't already. And you need to learn how to store those Git repositories somewhere in the cloud and share them with others or somewhere online, right? So GitHub, GitLab are big sources for that. There's things like Azure repos and AWS source code or code commit and things like that. But really, I think most people these days are, especially now, are talking about GitHub a lot. GitLab's getting a lot of attention. Ultimately, it's the workflow, right? Understanding, hey, how do I build a repo locally or build one up there and bring it down or push it up there? And how do I do that whole workflow process? How do I write Markdown, which sounds intimidating, really isn't. That's a great way to communicate. It's a great way to document projects. It's a great way to take notes, because ultimately Markdown, a very high level kind of syntax, is rendered as HTML. Very useful. And you can do that right there in your GitHub repos. Like I said, some of you are probably already doing this stuff. Also, another thing that people tend to get stuck on in this domain is collaborating on projects, filing pull requests, and basically contributing to open source projects or just projects internally at their company. Okay, so that would be another space. And again, it doesn't really matter which platforms you're working on, right? Maybe you're doing this stuff in Azure repos because that's what you've got access to. Cool. Everybody knows GitHub is free anyways, right? So anyways, moving on. Infrastructure as code is a good domain to focus on. Everybody's always working on this. I've been working on this continuously for 8 or 9 years because it changes all the time, right? From a multi-cloud perspective, obviously, Terraform is insanely interesting because it's vendor neutral, right? We can use it with AWS, Azure, GCP, all kinds of other stuff. So I think, Terraform is probably the #1 place where I would send people learning infrastructure as code. Pulumi is coming up a lot because you can use, hardcore programming languages, and you can test your code in much more depth with things like statically typed languages, C# and stuff like that, TypeScript. And so Pulumi allows you to do that kind of stuff. If you're a developer, Pulumi is really interesting. If you're not a developer, then you need to learn how to be a developer. Then you're writing infrastructure as code in a developer-centric language, right? So HashiCorp's HCL is a way easier lift than learning TypeScript and then going to Pulumi to do infrastructure as code. So I'd say if you're already a developer, Pulumi is awesome. And you might like the idea of having to learn C# and Pulumi to do infrastructure as code. Cool, that's an awesome challenge. But if you're looking for the path of least resistance, Terraform, right? In terms of platform specific, we all get involved in those projects where it's like you have to use this and you're kind of like, oh, all right, and you end up learning something. CloudFormation, ARM templates, Bicep, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, those are use cases where you have to use those. Again, I think for me, if my core capability is going to be Terraform, I'll understand the high-level concepts of CloudFormation. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of nuances, but I guess what I'm saying is, in a career plan for me in 2022, I'm probably not going to spend any time studying CloudFormation, ARM templates, based on what I'm doing, right? But that's because I'm doing multi-cloud. I'm thinking about certain things. So anyways, those are just some pieces of advice. I'm still going to pay attention to what's going on all these platform-specific solutions, but this is just kind of my thought process, right? CI/CD is going to be another big one. There's so many different platforms. I think right now what I would do is focus on GitHub Actions because everybody's talking about it. Microsoft's innovating on it like crazy. I can hear somebody unmuted themselves. If you could mute yourself, that'd be awesome. Just in case there's any feedback. So yeah, Azure pipelines and all kinds of different third-party CI/CD platforms. But GitHub Actions is emerging. Microsoft's putting a lot of energy into it. And I have a funny feeling that we're all going to be working in there a lot more over the next 12, 18, 24 months, right? So Microsoft will find a way to push us more into that. Again, focus on the patterns of CI/CD, right? Like builds, releases, building artifacts and storing those, and versioning your artifacts, all that kind of stuff. Blue-green deployments. Focus on the patterns. That way, when you jump into GitHub Actions, or now you got to jump over to AWS Code Pipeline or whatever, you understand those high-level concepts. I don't think I need to tell you guys that containers and Kubernetes are a big deal. So I would just say, make sure that you understand the process within a CI/CD pipeline of how to build a container image, how to automate that process, and then how to get it deployed somewhere. Because if you can talk that in an interview, right, you're in a much better position than lots of people. Because developers know that pretty well. But if you're not a developer, an infrastructure person, often, right, if they haven't been doing the cloud stuff that much or haven't been doing DevOps stuff, they're not going to have a ton of perspective there. And so if you can shortcut that by doing it yourself, and so that, okay, when I check in code to this repo that has a Docker file, I can use that Docker file to build an image for my container, and I can store that over an Azure Container Registry, and then I can release that into Azure App Service or something, right? If you can kind of talk about that process in an interview, even for me as a hiring manager, I'm like, geez, I'm like getting impressed, right? So make sure that you can do that. And even if it's messy, and even if you don't feel like you understand containers 100%, no worries, right? Just make sure you can get through that whole build process, build and release. And then obviously like orchestrators are a big deal, right? So I think Kubernetes is a huge opportunity, right? So you could go down the road of getting Kubernetes certified and be an expert in that space and do really well. But there's so many other areas, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, if you don't want to become a huge Kubernetes expert, just learn the basics of how to run a simple application of some kind on one of the managed platforms like AKS, EKS, GKE, or something like that. All right, checking the clock to make sure I'm okay on time. Last one here, all right? Monitoring and logging is one of the places where, I don't know, to me, it's like really boring whenever I have to teach. I'm just like, ugh. It's like, I never got into like geeking out and monitoring and stuff, but obviously it's super important. So that's a gap that a lot of people have when they come onto a team. And so you want to at least have some perspective there. So know your way around Azure Monitor, maybe Amazon CloudWatch. Prometheus is getting a lot of attention, right? So that would be something to take a look at. Okay, so those would be the technical areas where personally I'd be doubling down, and that's where I'm going to be spending a lot of my time in these. And so if you have technical gaps, I think that if you can think about some of the stuff I've said and apply the patterns and focus on the patterns, right, and being able to communicate some of that stuff, you're going to be in good shape. All right, excuse me. So let's go into soft skills. I'm going to share kind of 3 major domains, and then we'll do some Q&A. So number 1, knowing your strengths. This was really interesting because I had no idea how powerful this was going to be. And like, it was really powerful when I realized it for myself. And now I've been, like, over the past year, watching it really work for other people. So it's been really fun. So here's the story with this one. This is basically a personality test. See the link at the bottom, viacharacter.org. This is a free personality test, and this is based on positive psychology. And positive psychology is essentially, something that's been around, I don't know, 30 years or so, 40 years in the academic and medical field. And essentially what they do in positive psychology, they study what's right about people, not what's wrong. Because like traditional psychology prior to that was just like, what the heck's wrong with all these psychos? Let's try to figure out how to fix that. But positive psychology focuses on, hey, what is like the good stuff, and how do you cultivate happiness? And because if you think about it, right, if you're happier, you're going to perform way better, and you're just going to enjoy life, right? So the cool part about this is this character test, so the strengths test, is based on positive psychology, and it kind of goes through like 24 character strengths that's actual scientists, right, like clinical researchers, doctors, right, PhDs and stuff, have studied across all the different like religions and cultures throughout the entire world, right? So they left no stone unturned. They found like all the most common 24 strengths across all of humanity up to this point, and they have a very accurate strengths test. Okay, so if you take a look at this this screenshot here, I mean, it sounds really basic, and I remember when I first heard about this, I'm like, yeah, big deal. But man, this stuff is powerful, because what you need to do is you have to figure out what your strengths are, but the trick is to put them into action. And I think that that's the piece where most people, number one, they don't know what they're strong on. And number two, they don't know what they're strong, or they don't know how to put it into action to get the result. Because just knowing that you might be good at leadership isn't enough. You have to practice leadership, right? So a lot of people, sometimes they know that they're strong with like Terraform. They don't realize that they're strong in leadership, for example, right? So anyways, that's why this is so important. And one of the things that, I don't know, if any of you manage a team or anything like that, this is a lot of stuff like when you get into management, they have you do for yourself, but also to manage your people. But I think in this ecosystem, in this era, even as an individual contributor, like knowing some of the stuff that the managers are doing is going to help you too, because we're all being pushed harder than we've ever been pushed before, right? So long story short, let me show you kind of like the output, or excuse me, like the strengths, right? So these are the 24 strengths, and I'll just give you an idea. So for example, like when you go through the strength test assessment, it's going to give you a report. It only takes like 20 minutes. It'll give you a report, and it'll be like, here's your top 5 strengths, right? And if you want to pay an extra like $30 or something like that, it'll show you all 24 strengths, and it'll show you where you're ranked. So you'll also know what you're not strong at. But for example, look at leadership, right? The leadership strength is based on the justice virtue. And it's like, if you have this strength, then it's like, I take charge and guide groups to meaningful goals. I ensure good relations among group members, right? That's what a leader does. So about, I don't know, 12 years ago, I was like really bummed out on my job. I had a lot of career success. Like I was crushing it. I was working as a senior engineer, and I worked at a cool place, I guess. It was all right. Maybe not cool, but it was a good job, right? It was a good paying job, good stability. But I was just so bored, and, I couldn't figure out why. And a couple of years later, I did the strengths assessment, right? And I realized that one of my top 5 strengths was leadership. I was like, oh, I got a strength of leadership. I'm not using it, right? So the idea with this is once you find your strengths, you figure out a creative way to put them into practice in your career and in your personal life. So when I figured out that, hey, I've got a leadership skill and I'm not using it, and if I used it, I'd be way happier. That's when I started doing like the stuff that Johnny Chips does. I started doing user groups. I started writing books. I became an MVP. And that's why it's important to figure out your own strengths and not just follow what everybody else is doing. Okay. And that's what this is about. Taking ownership of your career is about not listening to everybody else, right? It's not looking outside and be like, oh, Mike Pfeiffer is doing a podcast. I guess I need to do one too, right? Maybe it's not the right move for you. Maybe your strengths, are more like, I don't know, maybe you've got like a fairness strength, right? And justice is your number one virtue. So think about that creative. Like, how would you weave that into technical? Well, when I think justice, right, I think security, right? So you might be like, hey, I didn't realize my strength was going to be fairness and justice. Maybe map that over to how could I put that into action in my career, right? So it's kind of a creative idea, But I would spend some time to do this because it's going to cultivate self-awareness. It's going to help you know where you're strong. And then also, I'll give you one where I'm not strong on. Let's see. Is it on here? Yeah, forgiveness, right? Temperance. Just being honest, right? Like I'm an impatient person and I have to work on that, right? I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But, that's probably I think that was my number 24. So like I forgive others when they upset me and behave badly towards me, right? And all this kind of stuff. Knowing that about myself helps me in the future, right? So if somebody's like, hey, dude, we're like totally going to screw you over, it's going to be really hard for me to come back to that. But if I had a higher level of temperance, right, I could bounce back from that faster. So knowing the ones where I'm weak at too helps me develop those strengths even more, right? So it's kind of cool. All right, so moving forward from that's number 1, right? I know it's kind of weird, but trust me on this. I promise you, this totally works. Putting your strengths into action will totally work. Number 2, communication skills. This is one where I just pretty much I don't know, I would say 90% of the meetings that I go to that involve like actual engineering projects, a lot of times it's just this stuff that blows everything up. Not understanding how to come at somebody. it's an art, right? It's a communication skill. And a lot of times people don't use it. And, one place where this would come up where the lack of awareness or lack of communication skills pops up, would just be attacking somebody without knowing it in your communication, right? For example, hey, dude, what happened with that cluster upgrade? Everything's blowing up, right? Just that one question kind of seems like an accusation, right? It's kind of like, wait, hang on a second, relax, right? So if you come at somebody in a different way by saying, hey, listen, by maybe, acknowledging what they're dealing with. Hey, look, I know that you guys had a rough week with that upgrade and there was some stuff going on. I just wanted to check in and ask you a couple questions about that, right? And that'll soften the approach. That's just a basic example. This is an awesome book. This book has been around 100 years. There's so many communication books out there, but I've just been, especially this year, going back and recommending this one because it's so good. And the guy tells great stories throughout the book. You can kind of, I don't know, the stories are good and it's a cool way to tell stories, but you'll learn so much if you just follow this. I actually went and stole this off Google Images because there's so many different posters out there of what are fundamentals from this book because it's so good, right? And these are just 3, right? So number 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. So in a communication skills kind of situation, right? You want to make sure that you're not criticizing people. You definitely don't want to be complaining all the time. Nobody wants to listen to anybody that's complaining. Especially, that's one of my opinions, but it's who wants to listen to the pessimist chime in with their 2 cents about something we're trying to achieve? I hate that. It doesn't work. It's a negative energy pattern. But look at what it says here. Human nature does not like to admit fault. And when people are criticized or humiliated, they're going to rarely respond well to that, right? So, anything that can come off as a criticism is going to be an attack, usually, or be seen as an attack, right, on someone's identity. So, like I said, acknowledgement is huge. And just communicating that, hey, I just want to recognize that you guys had it tough this week. It's been really hard. You guys are strapped for time, but is there any way you can help me with this? That kind of stuff, right? Another thing on here, give honest and sincere appreciation. Appreciation is one of the most powerful tools in the world. People will rarely work at their maximum potential under criticism. And it's so true, man. And I don't remember when I learned that, but I worked in a ski area before I got into tech support. So 1996, 97, I worked at the top of this mountain and every night we had to scrub the toilets. And I would always my team that was with me, they were doing all that kind of stuff. I would always tell them, hey guys, thanks for your hard work tonight. Thanks for taking out the garbage and thanks for scrubbing the toilets. And they would come back every day and just do an awesome job at that, right? And I noticed any time that I didn't take the time to do that, they wouldn't do a good job the next day, right? It's a dumb example, but people hardly ever hear that. They hardly ever hear that they're appreciated. So, when it's happening, take the opportunity to throw it in there because that'll help you build relationships as well. That'll strengthen your relationships with your team. An example might be, hey, I really appreciate you taking 5 extra minutes yesterday to explain how IP subnetting works. It really helped me a lot. Thank you. Right? Very basic. Last one is arouse any other person an eager want. And that's what leaders do, right? Leaders inspire us with hope. So if you want to get into leadership, optimism and looking at glass half full and can do and let's go. That's the idea. All right, so that's communication skills. And the last one is mindfulness. All right. And I got a couple of notes for you here, but mindfulness is interesting, right? Because a lot of times people are like, oh, big deal. Give me a break. This is like, not something I need to think about. But like, if you look at what big tech is doing, they're doing this because they have to. And what I mean by that is this book here is a great example of the story of what Google had to do to make sure they're not burning everybody out at Google. So I read this book last Christmas. And the reason I know that is because I went to take the screenshot earlier and Amazon's like, hey, you bought this last December. Awesome book because it talks about essentially what Google had to do to get their engineers to a place where they could deal with all of this stuff that's coming at them. And they built all these this mindfulness thing on their campus, like meditation rooms, all this kind of stuff. Really interesting story. But I mean, if you think about what's happening, right? Like take a second to think about this. We're getting all this technology thrown at us, right? That's kind of born in big tech, right? Cloud native. And now we're trying, and essentially what's happening, right, is all these big tech companies are trying to teach us how to do what they're doing. Hey, you need to run microservices, and you need to containerize your application, and you need to do CI/CD, and you do infrastructure as code, and all this stuff, right, that we've never done before. What's that causing? Massive amounts of stress because you can't really recover when you're working, day and night, right? So Google realized that about their engineers. They're like, geez, we're really pushing the envelope here. We're burning people out like crazy. We need to teach people mindfulness, right? So that could be very simple. It could be as simple as, installing that Calm app on your phone and doing some meditation on a consistent basis. It could be getting into, you might not want to meditate, right? There's other things that I'm working on right now. I've got one of those Aura rings. It's like a Swiss wearable device. It tracks your sleep. It tracks your heart rate variability. And I recently got this app. I might do an episode on this later or something where it just helps you engage with the app. It's called biofeedback. And so the app is using the ring to track your heart rate variability. And the app is helping you kind of level out. To release something to market, and it's like you're completely fried. This kind of stuff helps you bounce back and recover and regulate your energy. All right. The other thing that they get into in this book is emotional intelligence, which helps you in the realm of teamwork and all this kind of stuff. So kind of moving forward, all the things that I've talked about in the soft skills section, all this work builds emotional intelligence, aka EQ, and self-awareness, right? Which is what usually managers are focusing on. But like I said a minute ago, we're all in charge of our own career. You're managing your own career, right? So I would argue that you should do the same things that managers are doing for yourself and for your own career, and treat your career like a business, right? So all these things that we talked about will do these two things. Last thing here, I'll kind of wrap up, all right? How are we on time? I think we're pretty close. So this is kind of like all the things that go into emotional intelligence, or EQ. And take a look at the left, right? You've got intrapersonal, like dealing with yourself. So for emotions, self-awareness. Like I said, knowing your strengths, developing some mindfulness, knowing your tendencies and things like that. That will help you kind of stay on track there, play to your strengths, be happier, perform better, right? And that kind of flows into behaviors there on the left, intrapersonal, for self-management and self-performance, right? One of the things that the mindfulness will help you with is, getting triggered. You ever get that where somebody just like really gets your goat, and you can't let it go for like the rest of the day, or like for a whole week, it's like really pissing you off, you know. Developing more mindfulness will help you like punt those thoughts, right? Just like let it go, man. And next thing you know, you're freeing up all this energy to go and do something more positive, right? It's very interesting. So in the intrapersonal domain, that's what those things are helping us with, right? And then the interpersonal domain, the communication skills and stuff is helping us with social awareness. Knowing ourselves better is helping us with that as well. You know, we're not insulting people. We're not creating conflicts. That's rolling into relationship management, right? Working on teams. And at that point, when you start to get good at that stuff, you can start working with people and holding them accountable for their performance, right? That's why managers have to do all the stuff that I'm talking about today. Anyways, powerful stuff, you guys. I like Stephen Covey and his work, so I included this image as well. Self-awareness is our capacity to stand apart from ourselves and examine our thinking, our motives, our history, our scripts, our actions, and our habits, and ultimately our tendencies, right? I love this because if you really think about what he said here, like your history, right? All your baggage and your opinions and like the culture of where you were raised, all that kind of stuff really matters in the actions today. And if you're not aware of it, you don't have that self-awareness, it could just show up in your actions, right? You might say something that offends somebody just because like that's how your family was, like you messed around, or that's how you messed around with your friends in college. That might not be cool. That's not a good social awareness, right? So doing this work really makes a huge difference. But the last thing he says here that I love, right, is knowing your tendencies. And as you develop more and more self-awareness and figuring out and like, how am I screwing myself over all the time? Oh, there it is. You become aware of it, and then you can avoid it in the future. Definitely an art, not a science. So anyways, here's my key takeaways. Determine your technical skills, the ones that you want to bet on in 2022. Remember I talked about betting on technology, NT4 versus NetWare, PowerShell versus the GUI, cloud versus no cloud, right? Bet on the next thing that you think is going to be good based on some of the stuff we talked about and your own opinions. Commit to deliberate practice in 2022. I did an episode with Johnny Chips earlier this year, and it's on his YouTube channel. I also cross-posted it to Cloud Skills FM, where we talked about like kind of a similar talk, but different content of treating your career like a business. I talked about deliberate practice in that one, so that'd be a good one to check out. But basically, you want to take that hard skills list, the things you want to bet on, and you want to start working on that stuff and figuring out, like, how can I surface that? Is it just going to be for my own projects at work? Or am I going to put something out on the internet, like build YouTube or build some open source projects, whatever. But you got to use it. Find your strengths, right? Do the feedcharacter.org strengths assessment and figure out what your strengths are. Start putting them into action. Like I said, I didn't know I was a leader until I did that. And then once I started practicing leadership, I'm like, holy cow, man, this is fun. Start creating a mindfulness practice, start thinking about it a little bit more, put some energy into that. And, in the beginning, that might just be, I'm going to have an hour to myself every day for my own career development. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's just me doing research or just taking some time to figure out what I want to do. Because a lot of times what happens, and the reason we don't take ownership, is because we don't have time, right? There's demands coming from everybody else, our job, our family. We're rolling out of bed, and, at the last minute going to work, and we just forget to plan for the long term, right? So maybe your mindfulness practice at the beginning is just taking some free time to plan for your own thing. Communication skills, put those into practice. If you can't read the entire Win Friends and Influence Them book, just go out and find like the Cliff Notes and then put those into practice. Like how would I show appreciation for somebody else? Like maybe I don't never do that, right? Like how can I do that today? Who needs to hear that from me today would be something that I might wonder in the morning. Who needs to hear like a little bit of like, appreciation today? Who's been getting burned out, right? Whatever. Start practicing that stuff, and then it'll become automatic. And then finally, one of the most important things is check out cloudskills.fm podcast. And that is my presentation. Thank you, guys. If you want to do some Q&A, I'd love to get into it.
Mike, thanks so much. I mean, every time I hear one of your talks, it's like just this aura of inspiration just flows out. It's great, Mike. It's absolutely fantastic talk, as always. You're getting a lot of love in the chat there. As Mike said, does anybody have any questions, they want to come off mute and have a quick chat around, we've got some time for that. There we go. I think Hugh has put something. Hugh, do you want to come off mute? And Derek's also listing some awesome points there in the chat as well about establishing morning routines.
Oh, cool. Yeah. What's up,
Hugh,
Derek?
if you're there.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just curious when it was a, sorry, by the way, it was a great talk, Mike. I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
So on the languages list, you put Python as one of the key languages. And not many. There are obviously many other choices on and statically typed languages and so on. And I was just wondering what your logic process was in kind of Python as opposed to others, because I'm sort of hearing this more and more, but I'm not hearing very strong and consistent reasoning. And that's why I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think a lot of people are probably in that scenario of wondering that question. And I actually was too. So I'll share my perspective. But number one, I think we've all seen the demand, right? And we've seen like the Stack Overflow develop like top languages reported last few years. Python's always at the top. I shared a thing on LinkedIn about 2 months ago that was a GitHub repo with like 100 or 500 like Python snippets. And when I shared that, it went freaking viral on LinkedIn. So obviously the demand is there. So one aspect of it for me is top of mind language, right? A lot of people, and this also maps back to things like, DevOps, where like, hey, we need DevOps engineer. Well, it's like, you don't even know what that means, but it means something to them, right? So it's like, there's a lot of people out there that think Python's important, even if it might not be for them, just because it's got brand awareness more than ever. So for me, that's kind of one big thing, because what happens in those scenarios is teams go off and they start building stuff and they're like, well, we can only use Python right now. And that's what's happening to me right now. So I can't share the whole backstory, but basically the stuff that I'm working on right now, it was only Python, and it was only Python because they needed something to start off with version 1. And they figured Python has got so much awareness that we should be able to get everybody on the team to learn that first before we can support multiple languages. So I picked Python as one for anybody that's new, that wants opportunities, to be able to go into an interview and be like, hey, I've been doing some Python. But if you're working at a place and you're like, I know I'm going to be working here for the next 5 years and we're never going to use Python, then obviously that would trump my recommendation. So that's my line of thinking. I think Go is in the same boat, because not only is the performance is so good, right, but it's being used to develop things like Terraform and Kubernetes. And it's got a lot of brand recognition. So it's definitely not the best choice for every single scenario. But that's my line of thinking for that one for sure. So take it with a grain of salt, absolutely.
No, thank you. No, that's great. Yeah, I can follow your logic completely.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's horses for courses, isn't it? But yeah, thank you. That's great. Thanks.
Cool. Absolutely.
I think we've got another question in the chat, Mike, from Neil. Just asking around cloud security, seeing a lot of traction in the market at the minute. What are your thoughts on cloud security at the minute, Mike? Is it something worth focusing on, do you think? What are you seeing from a skills perspective? Yeah,
absolutely. Cloud security is probably one of the biggest things in cloud. I think that's one of the biggest hiring challenges for people, cloud in general, but cloud security is so hard to find. So that's going to be a huge opportunity going forward. And that's a really interesting place to double down, especially if you don't like maybe you don't like the programming as much. You still should have some computer science awareness, right? But maybe you could do other things in that space that are a little bit different, right? So if you like that concept, if you don't want to spend your time maybe thinking about building and releasing software as much, and maybe thinking more about like, how do we defend at the perimeter? How do we make sure the network is secure? How do we make sure that, and even if you get into the DevOps conversation, DevSecOps and build security, but there's so many different places in there. But yeah, I mean, cloud security is just going to be freaking bonkers, man. There's going to be nothing but opportunity in there.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mike. So yeah, like I say, Mike, huge thanks for giving up your time today for coming on and giving
Absolutely.
that talk to the group. If everybody wants to show their appreciation, awesome as always, Mike. And leaves me just thank you for your time and have a fantastic festive period now, Mike.
Likewise.
And a happy new year.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody, and let's have an awesome 2022. Appreciate you guys. I'm going to go. I'm going to I'm going into vacation mode at the end of this week. I know that you're, like you said on Twitter today, John, this is your last day, right? Going into vacation mode?
It sure is. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks. Have an awesome vacation, and I'll see you guys in 2022.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
Awesome stuff. Okay, we have Quizmaster Matt on the screen. So we'll kick straight in with our quiz. It's a different format this week. So for those of you that have joined before, it's not on Kahoot. It's on Menti.
Or it's not on Kahoot.
Oh, you put the link in the chat there. That's good. Menti.com.
Way ahead of you, mate.
Awesome. So if everyone wants to join in, we've got, what we doing the usual two £25 vouchers, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. You should be prompted for a username in a minute. Bear with us, we've not done this one before, so it's non-tech this time. It's a fairly bog standard Christmas quiz. So I hope you've all been going through a lot of these recently because they'll recognise a lot of the questions. Big shout out to Dean for letting us use his Menti account. It's really appreciated. If we move on, we should hopefully get a whole load of people in. That looks like people coming in. That's good. I have no idea who any of these people are.
He wanted to call me Kathy then, Matt. Is that right? As I
Wanted to
joined.
call you what?
Kathy.
You can be Kathy if you want today.
So
13 in?
Yeah, Chris hopes there's no licensing questions in here, Matt.
No, not this time.
How many we've got
no
17 in the chat. 16 really.
How many M365 licenses does Santa need for his North Pole workshop? Probably a good question. And which level does he need them at?
Exactly. N+1.
They need Visio? I don't know.
Dean will answer that one. You can come off mute if you want. You don't have to type it all. Yeah, is anybody struggling, I guess? Is anybody struggling? Are we waiting for anyone?
We've got 13 people in. That's not bad.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that's cool.
Right then, let's see. First one. Which of the following is not one of Santa's reindeer? I lied. There was one technical question in there. Yes, I'm pretty sure most people knew the answer to that one. Moving on. Question 2. According to the song, how many different things does Mariah Carey want for Christmas? All she wants for Christmas is you. There we go. Next one.
We'd have a rendition of it then, Matt.
No, about as close as you get. Which is worth more, frankincense or myrrh? It's myrrh. It's worth about twice as much, I think.
It's a balm.
Apparently. You can blame the site that I copied the answer from. Next one, question 4. In the Muppets Christmas Carol, what did Fozziwig's factory make? I love this film. Best Christmas film this is. Oh, that stumped people. A bit slower this time. 3, 2, 1. It was officially Fozziwig's Rubber Chicken Factory. Question 5. How old was Kevin in the 1990 Christmas comedy film Home Alone? He was 8. Well done. Majority of people getting that one. We might have a leaderboard coming up now. Midway through on the leaderboard, you've got Matt B in the lead at the moment. Oh, familiar faces down the bottom this time. What's going on?
I'm not doing very well.
Thanks, John.
Well, I'm doing better than you, Chris.
Question 6. Which festive song is the biggest selling single in the UK chart history not to reach number 1?
Good question, that.
Oof.
It was Last Christmas.
No way. Who got that right? Somebody needs to own up there.
Yeah. Question 7. What's the Grinch's dog called? Dog, Max, Ginger, or Minion? Oh, lots of people Grinch fans there. Good. Question 8. How many ghosts show up in A Christmas Carol? Not the Muppet one, I might add, the original. It's 4. Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present and Future, and his partner Jacob Marley. Question 9. Come on. In what decade did Coca-Cola start using Santa Claus in advertisements? Was it the 20s, the 10s, the 30s, or the 40s?
Any reason they're not chronological?
Because I'm annoying like that. Because that would be far too easy. It was the 20s.
Oof.
Question 10. Nearly there. Yeah. In what year did the first Home Alone film come out? Now, I actually put this in one of the previous questions. If you were concentrating. It was 1990. And Nicholas, yes, you're right. Last Christmas did make it posthumously on streaming platforms in 2020. I wasn't counting that one. In other words, curse you.
Yeah, you've had a correction, Matt.
Yep. My decision is final. 11. Who wrote the classic Christmas book, The Snowman? Is it Julie Donaldson, Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams, or Raymond Briggs? It was Raymond Briggs. Also wrote one of my favourite books, Fungus the Bogeyman. Not very Christmassy, though. Last question. Die Hard takes place on Christmas Eve, but in which city? And is definitely a Christmas movie.
Oh, a bit wrong answer.
Nakatomi Plaza.
In Los Angeles. That split the room, that one did. Wow, I wasn't expecting that to be that divisive.
So it's a drum roll now then. So top two get the £25 voucher.
Looking like
We've got our winners. Oh, Matt B
takes the lead,
and Jack is second. So we are Mr. Is that Jack, Mr. Roper? I'm sure I saw him earlier. I'm sure it is. It is. Jack, is that you? I'm presuming it is. And Matt Boyd.
Congratulations,
now, forever hold your peace. Yeah, obviously, just do me a favor and drop me a DM with your email addresses. Not that I don't have them already, but just so that I've got to remind me to get the voucher out to you. So yeah, drop it to me on Twitter or LinkedIn or anything like that, and I'll make sure the £25 vouchers find their way to your inbox. And as always, Matt, thank you so much for a fantastic quiz.
As always.
And yeah, thanks to the cloud management community for the use of their quiz platform as well. So there we go. Right, okay. Let me just quickly share my screen to wrap up this evening's event. So firstly, as always, huge thanks to everybody for joining. Really is appreciated. Look, this is a community Azure user group. For those that have come for the first time, go and follow us on Twitter, sign up to the LinkedIn group, get involved. If you are, help us spread the word as well. Tell your colleagues and friends, anybody that's interested in this area, do get them over for our next events. Leads me to thank our awesome speakers for this evening. Olivier Bloch, again, both speakers, go and follow them on Twitter. They've got some awesome content out there and will help you in these areas. And of course, Mike Pfieffer, that we've just had the awesome session there from Mike. So, I'm sure you'll agree it's been some fantastic sessions again tonight. Hopefully send us into the new year with a little bit of a thought on our minds for what our New Year's resolutions might need to be, and inspire us to kind of, think about where we want to be for next year. Let's all have that positive vibe into the festive period. So there we go. And talking of next year, we've already got our next event lined up for the 19th of January. We've got Aidan and Alpa joining us to talk about Azure Image Builder and Azure SQL with DevOps as well. So stick that date in your diary. That's up there live now. You can go and RSVP on the Meetup app. All our links are there to go and join into all our socials and, help us spread the word. We want to grow our audience as best we can and get these great, content speakers out there to everybody. So on that note, the last thing that I've got to ask, if you don't mind spending 2 minutes to either go to that URL there, the WOW feedback, or scan that QR code and drop us some feedback. It really would be appreciated. But for now, I think on behalf of the Welsh Azure user group, I'd like to wish you all a fantastic festive season. Happy Christmas if that's what you celebrate, and obviously a prosperous and a healthy new year. And take control of your career. Go and learn some new skills for the new year, and come back and join us. And I'm sure you can join in with some more fun sessions in the new year. But I don't know if you want to say anything, Matt. If you've got anything to add.
No. I hope everyone has a great holiday, and we're looking forward to seeing you back again in the new year, like John says.
Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you all soon. Bye for now. God, it's all very quiet. It's waving to space.
Isn't it? Spooky.
Cheers, guys. Take care. See you soon.
Nice one, Chris.
See you, Chris.
See you
Take
soon.
care, mate. Have a lovely break, John.
Yes, we'll do. You too.
Cheerio. Thank you.
Cheers, Nicholas.
Well done, mate. Have a good Christmas, mate. I'll speak to you soon.